The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, silencing 200 of Beverly Hills' most powerful elite in an instant. Aiden Beaumont stood at the center of the ballroom, his tailored Armani suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. His father's charity gala, the social event of the season, had just become the stage for his rebellion. The chandelier above cast fractured light across his face, illuminating the determination in his eyes. "I don't want any of this," Aiden said, his voice cutting through the shocked silence like a blade. "Not the trust fund, not the family business, not a single dollar I didn't earn myself." His mother's face went pale beneath her perfect makeup, her diamond necklace catching the light as she brought a trembling hand to her throat. His father's jaw clenched so hard Aiden could see the muscle twitching beneath his tanned skin. $300 million of net worth, and their only son was rejecting it all in front of everyone who mattered in their world. "Aiden, we'll discuss this at home," his father said through gritted teeth, forcing a smile for the crowd that fooled no one. "No, Dad, I'm done being your successor, your legacy, your puppet. I want to build something that's mine, something real, something I can actually be proud of when I look in the mirror." The whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Women in designer gowns leaned toward their companions, their jewelry glittering as they gossiped. Men in tuxedos exchanged knowing glances, already calculating how this family drama might affect their business dealings with the Beaumonts. "You have no idea what you're saying," his mother whispered urgently, stepping forward and grabbing his arm. "You're 16 years old. You've never had to work for anything. You don't know what real life is like." "Exactly," Aiden replied, gently but firmly removing her hand from his arm. "And whose fault is that?" His father's face turned crimson. Senator Morrison and his wife stood frozen near the champagne fountain. The CEO of Beaumont Industries, his father's right-hand man, looked like he'd witnessed a car crash. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Aiden turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor. Behind him, his mother's sob cut through the silence, but he didn't turn back. He couldn't. If he looked back, he might lose his nerve. That was 3 days ago. Now Aiden sat in the back of his Range Rover, probably for the last time, watching the familiar streets of Beverly Hills roll past. Mansions that cost more than small countries lined both sides of the palm tree-dotted boulevard. He'd grown up playing in these streets, attending pool parties at these houses, living a life most people only saw in movies. The conversation with his parents that morning had been brief and brutal. His father had called him into the study at dawn. The room smelled of leather and expensive scotch, filled with first-edition books and awards celebrating achievements Aiden had never quite understood. His mother sat on the leather sofa, her eyes red from 3 days of crying. "You want independence," his father had said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Fine, you'll get it. Complete independence." "Richard, please," his mother had interjected, but his father held up a hand. "No, he made his choice in front of 200 people. He humiliated us, humiliated our name, everything we've built. So let's give him exactly what he asked for." His father had laid out the terms with the cold precision of a man closing a business deal. No allowance, no credit cards, no car, no mansion, no trust fund, no family connections or introductions. They would give him $200 and whatever he could fit in a duffel bag. That was it. "You want to prove yourself," his father had said, his voice hard as stone. "Prove it. You have 6 months. If you can't survive, you come home and never question us again. You'll join the family business, attend Stanford like we planned, and live the life we've prepared for you. If you somehow succeed, we'll respect your decision, but I don't think you'll make it 2 weeks." His mother had added one condition through her tears, her voice breaking with every word. "Please, just text us once a week so we know you're alive. That's all I ask. Just let me know my baby is okay." Aiden had agreed to everything without hesitation, though his hands had been shaking as he signed the papers his father's attorney had somehow produced overnight. They'd thought of everything, documented everything. This wasn't just a lesson. It was a legally binding agreement. The driver, Marcus, who'd been taking Aiden to school since he was 6 years old, pulled up to the corner of 6th and Spring in downtown LA. 45 minutes from Beverly Hills, but it might as well have been a different planet. "You sure about this, Mr. Aiden?" Marcus asked, his kind eyes meeting Aiden's in the rearview mirror. "It's not too late to change your mind." "I'm sure, Marcus. Thanks for everything." "You take care of yourself, son. And if you ever need anything, you call me. I don't care what your parents say." Aiden climbed out with his single duffel bag, watching his former life drive away in the form of that Range Rover disappearing into traffic. The streets smelled different here. No manicured lawns or jasmine flowers, just exhaust fumes, fried food, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Reality, maybe. The hostel was called Downtown Beds, and it looked exactly as depressing as it sounded. The lobby had flickering fluorescent lights and linoleum floors that had once been white, but were now a dingy gray. A bored clerk barely looked up from his phone as Aiden approached. $18 a night, pay weekly if you want a discount. $120 for the week. Bathrooms shared, no guests after 10, no drugs, no weapons. Break the rules, you're out. We clear. "Clear," Aiden said, counting out bills from his rapidly shrinking cash. The room was on the 3rd floor, accessible only by stairs because the elevator had an out-of-order sign that looked permanent. The hallway smelled like mildew and old cigarette smoke, despite the no-smoking signs every 10 feet. Aiden could hear televisions blaring in different languages, a baby crying, someone yelling in what sounded like Russian. His room was number 307, the key stuck in the lock, requiring 3 hard jiggles before the door opened. The room was barely bigger than his old walk-in closet, with a bed that sagged in the middle like a hammock, a shared bathroom down the hall, and a window that overlooked a fire escape and a brick wall. The walls were thin enough that he could hear his neighbors arguing in Spanish, every word crystal clear, even though he didn't understand most of them. Aiden sat on the edge of the bed, and it creaked ominously under his weight. He pulled out his phone. The iPhone 14 Pro that suddenly felt obscenely expensive in this environment. His Instagram was full of messages from friends, most of them mocking him, calling his rebellion a publicity stunt. "Bet you're back home by Monday," Connor had written, adding 3 laughing emojis. "Your dad must be pissed lol," from Brittany. "This is the dumbest thing you've ever done," from his cousin Marcus. A few offered help, genuine concern in their messages, but Aiden knew accepting would defeat the purpose. He'd made his choice. Now he had to live with it. He opened his banking app, something he'd rarely done before because money had always just appeared whenever he needed it. The screen showed $200. After paying for a week at the hostel, he had $80 left. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. He walked down to a corner store where the cashier watched him suspiciously the entire time, clearly assuming this kid in designer sneakers was going to shoplift something. Aiden bought a loaf of bread, peanut butter, and a gallon of water. Total cost, $11.43. He'd never paid attention to prices before. Now every penny felt significant. That night, lying on the sagging mattress in his underwear, because the room was sweltering and the window barely opened, Aiden stared at the water-stained ceiling and wondered if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The couple next door was fighting again. Someone upstairs was dragging furniture across the floor. Car alarms kept going off on the street below. This was reality. This was what most people lived, and it was terrifying. The next morning, Aiden walked into Mike's Diner, a greasy spoon 2 blocks from his hostel that advertised breakfast all day in faded letters on the window. The place smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, with cracked vinyl booths and a counter that looked like it hadn't been replaced since the 1970s. The owner, a thick-armed man in his 50s with a stained apron and a permanent scowl, looked him up and down skeptically. His name tag said Mike in simple block letters. "You lost, kid?" Mike asked, wiping down the counter with a rag that looked dirtier than the surface it was cleaning. "No, sir, I'm looking for work, any work. I saw you had a help wanted sign in the window." Mike snorted. "You ever worked a day in your life?" No, sir, but I'm a fast learner and I'm not afraid of hard work. Not afraid of hard work, Mike repeated, studying Aiden like he was a puzzle to be solved. Where you from? Does it matter? It does if you're gonna quit on me after one shift because your hands get a little wet. I won't quit. Can you start now? Yes, sir. Mike looked at him for another long moment, then grunted. Dishwasher, $8 an hour, California minimum wage. You get one meal per shift and that's it. No breaks except to eat. Show up late once you're done. Drop more than 3 plates in a month, you're done. Complain about anything, you're done. We clear. Crystal clear. Aprons in the back. There's already a pile waiting for you, and lose the sir stuff makes me feel old. It's just Mike. The first day was hell, unlike anything Aiden had ever experienced. His hands, which had never done more than swipe across a phone screen, grip a tennis racket, or hold a video game controller, turned red and raw from the industrial soap and scalding water within the first hour. The dish pit was a tiny closet of a room with a commercial dishwasher that belched steam and made a sound like a jet engine every cycle. Rosa, the head waitress, brought him stacks of dirty dishes in an endless stream, plates crusted with eggs and syrup, coffee mugs with lipstick stains, pots with burned food welded to the bottom. Everything had to be scraped, sprayed, washed, dried, and stacked before the next load arrived. His back ached from standing in one position. His feet throbbed in the cheap sneakers he'd bought at a thrift store that morning, $12, that seemed like highway robbery until he realized good shoes cost 10 times that much. His arms burned from lifting heavy bus tubs. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the spray from the industrial sink. By noon, he wanted to quit. By 2 p.m., he was fantasizing about calling his parents. By 4 p.m., when his 8-hour shift finally ended, he could barely stand. You did good, Rosa said, surprising him as he untied his apron with shaking hands. Most new people don't make it past lunch on their first day. Really? Aiden asked, his voice hoarse from breathing steam all day. Really, Mike's tough but fair. You show up, work hard, don't complain, he'll take care of you. You did all 3 today. During his break, which he'd taken after 6 hours because he physically couldn't continue without eating, Aiden sat in the alley behind the diner. The alley smelled like garbage and grease, but at least the air was fresh compared to the dish pit. He ate the meal Mike had allowed him, a burger and fries that tasted better than any food he'd ever had at a 5-star restaurant, probably because he'd actually earned it. His expensive phone felt absurd in his blistered hands. The notifications were endless. Instagram, Snapchat, text messages from friends making plans at beach houses and country clubs, a world he was no longer part of. He thought about calling his parents, about ending this experiment. One phone call and he could be home in an hour, sleeping in his king-sized bed with the memory foam mattress, ordering whatever he wanted from whatever restaurant he chose. His mother would fuss over him. His father would try not to say, "I told you so," but the words would hang in the air anyway. But then he remembered the look on his father's face at that gala, the certainty that Aiden would fail, that he'd come crawling back within a week. That look was enough to make Aiden stand up, throw away his half-eaten fries, and walk back inside. "You're back," Mike said, surprised. "Most kids take their break and never come back." "I'm not most kids." "We'll see about that." The weeks blurred together into a rhythm of exhaustion and small victories. Wake up at 5:30 when the alarm on his phone screamed. Shower in the communal bathroom, trying not to think about whose feet had been in that stall before his. Walk to the diner through streets that felt dangerous in the pre-dawn darkness, keeping his head down and his phone hidden. Work until 2 p.m., walk back to the hostel, sleep, repeat. Aiden's body adapted in ways he never thought possible. His hands toughened, developing calluses that would have horrified his mother. His muscles learned the rhythm of the work, the efficient movements that saved energy. His mind learned to zone out during the endless hours in the dish pit, to find peace in the monotony. His bank account grew slowly, $143 after the first week. Then 208, then 356. Each deposit felt like a victory. Each dollar represented time and effort and pain, making it worth more than any money he'd ever been given. He learned to budget in ways he'd never imagined. A dollar menu burger from the McDonald's 2 blocks over could be stretched into 2 meals if he was careful. Walking everywhere instead of taking the bus saved $2.75 per trip. Showering at the hostel instead of going to a gym meant no membership fees. Buying bread and peanut butter instead of eating out saved at least $20 a week. Every penny mattered in a way it never had before. But the hardest part wasn't the physical labor or the poverty or even the exhaustion. It was the invisibility. At Beverly Hills Prep, everyone had known his name, wanted his attention, sought his approval. Teachers had called on him first. Students had invited him to parties. His opinion had mattered because of who his parents were. Here he was nobody, just another broke kid washing dishes, one of thousands in a city that didn't care if you lived or died. Rosa was kind to him, and Mike had started giving him extra food sometimes, but no one knew his name. No one cared about his dreams or his fears or his struggles. It was exactly what he'd wanted, and it was crushing him in ways he hadn't anticipated. "You okay, Aiden?" Rosa asked one day during the lunch rush. She was the only person who consistently used his name, and it always made him feel slightly more human. "Yeah, I'm fine." "You don't look fine, you look sad." "I'm just tired." Rosa studied him with the wise eyes of someone who'd seen a lot of life. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and an accent that reminded him of his family's former housekeeper. She worked 2 jobs to support her 3 kids, walked everywhere because her car had broken down 6 months ago, and still somehow found the energy to be kind to everyone. "Being alone is hard," she said simply, "especially when you're used to people, but it gets easier, you'll find your people." "What if I don't?" "You will, good people always find each other." 2 months in, something changed. Aiden was sitting on his fire escape during his day off, a Tuesday that felt surreal because he'd never had a weekday off before, always filled with school or activities or obligations. He was watching the street below, observing the rhythm of the neighborhood in a way he never had before. That's when he noticed the vendor on the corner. An older Mexican woman was selling tamales from a cart, her movements practiced and efficient. She'd been there every single day since he'd arrived, but he'd never really seen her until now. Rain or shine, hot or cold, she was there at 6 a.m. and didn't leave until dark. Something about her hustle, her determination, reminded him of why he'd left in the first place. She wasn't born into success. She wasn't given anything. She was building it, one tamale at a time, with nothing but consistency and quality and refusal to quit. Aiden grabbed his phone and started recording. Not for his old Instagram, not for his former friends. Just because something inside him wanted to capture this moment, this story, this person who embodied everything he was trying to become. He went downstairs and approached her cart, his Spanish rusty and embarrassing. "Hola, pudo, can I ask you some questions for a video?" She looked suspicious at first, probably wondering if he was immigration or police or some other kind of trouble. But something in his face must have convinced her he was harmless because she nodded. Her name was Maria. She'd been selling tamales on this corner for 7 years. Her daughter was in community college, studying to be a nurse. Her husband had died 3 years ago. The tamales were her grandmother's recipe, passed down through 4 generations. She made them fresh every morning starting at 4 a.m. in the tiny kitchen of her 1-bedroom apartment. Aiden spent an hour with her, filming, asking questions, learning her story. She sold each tamale for $3, made about $50 a day, which meant on a good day she cleared $150. From that, she paid rent, utilities, supported her daughter's education, and sent money back to family in Mexico. She was doing more with less than anyone Aiden had ever known. That night in his hostel room, Aiden spent 3 hours editing the video on his phone using free apps he'd downloaded. He added text overlays about Maria's story, set it to music that felt right, crafted it into something that captured not just what she did, but who she was. Then, on impulse, he created a new Instagram account, Not under his real name, because that would bring questions and attention he didn't want. Just Street Spark LA. He posted the video with a simple caption, "Real success isn't inherited. It's earned one day at a time. Meet Maria." The video got 11 views that first hour, then 34. By the next morning, it had 1,500 views and growing. Maria's tamale cart had a line for the first time in years. "You did this?" she asked him in Spanish 2 days later, showing him the video on her daughter's phone with tears streaming down her face. "Everyone is coming. I sold out by noon yesterday, by noon." "You did this," Aiden replied in his broken Spanish. "I just told people where to find you." That moment changed everything inside Aiden. He'd spent 2 months feeling purposeless, invisible, questioning why he'd thrown away his old life. But helping Maria, telling her story, watching real change happen because of something he created that felt more meaningful than anything he'd ever done before. He started carrying his phone everywhere, filming the real hustlers of downtown LA. The shoe shiner who'd been working the same corner for 20 years, saving every penny for his daughter's college fund. The food truck owner who worked 3 jobs to keep his business alive, serving authentic Thai food his mother had taught him to cook. The barber who cut hair in the park because he couldn't afford rent on a shop, building a client base one haircut at a time. Each video was raw, honest, and hopeful. No fancy editing beyond what he could do on his phone. No pretense or manufactured drama. Just real people building real things with nothing but determination and refusal to quit. Street Spark LA grew faster than Aiden had imagined possible. 5,000 followers became 10,000 in a week, then 25,000, then 50,000. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, people thanking him for highlighting stories that mattered, for showing success that was actually achievable. Local businesses started reaching out, asking if he could feature them. The Thai food truck owner offered him free meals. The barber gave him a haircut. Maria insisted he take tamales home every time he saw her. Then someone asked if they could pay him to make a video for their business. "How much?" Aiden had asked, genuinely unsure. "Is $50 okay? I can't afford more." $50, 6 hours of work at the diner. Aiden spent 2 hours filming and editing the video for a small coffee shop that made artisanal espresso drinks. The video got 20,000 views. The coffee shop's sales tripled. More requests came in. Aiden started charging $50 for a small business, $100 for something larger. He always kept his rates low enough that struggling businesses could afford him because that was the point. He wasn't trying to get rich. He was trying to help people who were fighting the same fight he was. Mike noticed the change one morning when Aiden showed up for his shift at the diner. "You've been smiling more," Mike said, watching Aiden tie his apron. "What's going on? You meet a girl or something?" Aiden laughed and told him about Street Spark, about the videos, about the small fees he was collecting on the side. Mike listened carefully, his arms crossed over his barrel chest. "So you're doing marketing, social media stuff?" "I guess so. I didn't really plan it. It just kind of happened." "You any good at it?" "The businesses seem happy." Mike nodded slowly, thinking, "You're not quitting on me, are you? Because I just got you trained right." "Not yet. I need the steady income, but maybe someday." "Someday soon, I'm guessing." Mike paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Listen, I could use someone to handle my social media. Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff I don't understand. My daughter keeps telling me I need to get with the times. I'll pay you extra, couple $100, few hours of work. You interested?" Aiden felt something like hope bloom in his chest. Yeah, I'm interested." That was Aiden's first real client, and it taught him more about business than any class at Beverly Hills Prep ever had. He spent a week studying Mike's diner, understanding what made it special. The way Mike remembered everyone's usual order, how Rosa treated every customer like family, the consistency of the food, never fancy but always good. The diner had been a neighborhood fixture for 30 years, but hardly anyone outside a few blocks knew it existed. Aiden created an Instagram account for the diner and started posting daily. Photos of the food, sure, but more importantly, photos of the people. Mike flipping eggs with practiced efficiency, Rosa pouring coffee and laughing with a regular. The line cooks whose names Aiden had learned, Carlos and Jerome, both working 2 jobs, both dreamers in their own right. He posted customer reviews, highlighted the history of the diner, created a sense of community around the place. Within 2 weeks, Mike's diner went from a hidden gem to a destination. Lines formed out the door during breakfast and lunch. Yelp reviews multiplied. Food bloggers showed up wanting to feature the place. Mike had to hire 2 more servers and another cook just to keep up with demand. "I don't know what you're doing," Mike said, handing Aiden an extra $200 in cash one Friday afternoon, "but it's working, keep it up. And hey, if you ever want to cut back on dishes to do more of this, we can work something out." Other businesses followed quickly. A local bookstore that was struggling to compete with Amazon, a vintage clothing shop run by a young woman trying to make rent each month, a coffee roaster who'd lost his space and was selling beans out of his garage. Each video Aiden made told a real story, highlighted a real struggle, showed real people building real things. His fees grew with his reputation and his skill. Within another month, he was making more from Street Spark than from washing dishes, even with Mike's marketing work added to his restaurant wage. He quit the diner on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after starting. His hands had finally healed completely, the calluses fading but never quite disappearing. He'd never forget what they represented. Mike shook his hand firmly, his grip strong and calloused from decades of work. "You're gonna be something, kid. I knew it from day one. Don't forget where you started." "I couldn't forget if I tried, Mike. Thank you for taking a chance on me, for treating me like a person, for everything. Just doing what any decent human being would do. You needed a shot, I gave you one. You proved you deserved it. That's how the world should work, even if it doesn't always." Rosa hugged him tight, and Aiden realized he was crying. "You found your people," she whispered. "I told you that you would." Aiden moved out of the hostel the next week, into a shared apartment in Echo Park. It wasn't much, a bedroom the size of his old bathroom with 2 roommates he barely saw because they all worked different schedules, but it was his. Paid for with money he'd earned himself, every single dollar accounted for. The apartment had actual windows that opened, a kitchen, even though he still didn't really know how to cook, a living room with a couch that sagged but was clean. It felt like a palace compared to that hostel room. Street Spark LA hit 50,000 followers, then 75,000. Brands started noticing, small local companies at first, then bigger names. An organic juice company wanted to sponsor his content for $1,500 a month. A local bank wanted to partner on a series about small business loans, offering $3,000 for 6 videos. Aiden said yes to the deals that felt authentic and no to the ones that didn't. He'd learned that his integrity was worth more than quick money, that his audience trusted him because he only promoted things he actually believed in. He reinvested everything into Street Spark. He bought a real camera, a used Canon that cost $800 but made his videos look professional. He learned proper editing software, spending late nights watching YouTube tutorials and teaching himself skills he'd never needed before. He hired a part-time assistant, a community college student named Dev who understood social media better than anyone Aiden had ever met. His content got sharper, more professional, but never lost its raw authenticity. That was the secret, he realized. People could tell when something was real versus manufactured. They responded to genuine stories, to real struggle and real triumph. 4 months after leaving Beverly Hills, Street Spark LA had 150,000 followers. Aiden was making more money than he'd ever dreamed possible, certainly more than he'd made washing dishes, but he still lived carefully, still budgeted, still remembered what it felt like to count every dollar. Then came the video that changed everything. Aiden had featured a young single mother named Jasmine who was building a catering business out of her apartment kitchen. He'd found her through a mutual connection. Someone who'd eaten her food at a church potluck and insisted he meet her. Jasmine's story was heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. She'd been a chef at a high-end restaurant until she got pregnant. The father disappeared. The restaurant wouldn't accommodate her need for flexible hours, so she'd started cooking from home, building a client base one meal at a time, often with her 2-year-old daughter sleeping on the couch nearby. Her food was incredible, the kind of cooking that told a story with every bite. Her determination was unshakable despite the obstacles. Her dreams were simple: one day own a real restaurant where she could provide for her daughter and employ other single mothers who needed flexible work. Aiden spent 2 full days filming with Jasmine, capturing her waking up at 4 a.m. to prep, her daughter's tiny voice saying, "Mama, cook." The way Jasmine's face lit up when a customer texted praise, the exhaustion in her eyes when she finally sat down at 10 p.m. after working multiple jobs and cooking orders all day. The video was 10 minutes long, longer than his usual content, but he couldn't cut anything. Every moment mattered. He titled it simply, "Building Dreams at 4 a.m., Jasmine's Story." The video went viral within hours of posting, not just in LA, but nationally. 2 million views in 24 hours, 5 million by the end of the week, 10 million by day 10. News outlets picked it up. Food critics tracked down Jasmine's kitchen. Investors started calling, offering funding for her restaurant dream. Oprah's production company reached out about featuring Jasmine on a show about entrepreneurs. A publisher wanted to write a book about her journey. A Food Network executive asked if she'd be interested in a cooking show. Jasmine called Aiden crying, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "What do I do? How do I handle all of this?" "You take it one step at a time," Aiden said, "just like you've been doing, and you never compromise on what matters most." Then Aiden's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize, an LA area code, but not one he knew. "Is this the person behind Street Spark LA?" a woman's voice asked, professional and direct. "Yes, this is Aiden." "Aiden who? What's your last name?" He paused, his heart suddenly racing. He'd managed to keep his identity mostly private, going by just Aiden in all his content. Just Aiden for now. "Fair enough. Well, just Aiden. My name is Patricia Reeves. I'm the VP of Marketing at Collective Media Group. We are one of the largest marketing agencies in the country. That video you made of Jasmine, it's one of the most compelling pieces of branded content I've seen in 20 years. I'd like to talk to you about a potential partnership." "I appreciate that, but I'm not really looking to sell out or—" "Stop," Patricia interrupted, but not unkindly. "Let me save you some time. I'm not interested in buying you out or changing what you do. I'm interested in amplifying it. Can you come to our offices tomorrow? Just a conversation, no commitment." The meeting was at a downtown office tower, the kind of building Aiden's father did business in regularly. The lobby had marble floors and modern art, and a security desk that looked more intimidating than most banks. Aiden signed in, received a visitor badge, and took the elevator to the 32nd floor. Patricia Reeves's office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made Aiden sit up straighter in his chair. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "Can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" "Water would be great." She poured from a glass pitcher, handed him a crystal glass, and sat across from him rather than behind her desk. A power move, Aiden realized, making this feel like a collaboration rather than a pitch. "I'll get straight to it," Patricia said. "We've been watching your growth for the past 2 months. Your engagement rates are insane. Your audience trusts you in a way that's incredibly rare. Your storytelling ability is exceptional, especially for someone so young. That's worth more than gold in this industry." "I appreciate that, but like I said on the phone, I'm not really looking to sell out or change what I'm doing." Patricia smiled. "Selling out is doing something you don't believe in for money. I'm proposing something different. We have clients, major clients, who want to connect with real communities, not influencers pretending to be relatable, not manufactured authenticity. Real people doing real things, that's your specialty." What exactly are you proposing? A partnership. You maintain complete creative control of StreetSpark. We provide resources, connections, and access to bigger clients. You help our brands tell authentic stories, the kinds of stories you're already telling, and you get paid extremely well to do it. 6-month contract to start. If it works, we talk about something much bigger. How well is extremely well? Patricia wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it across the table. $25,000 a month, plus profit sharing on successful campaigns that could double or triple that amount. Aiden stared at it, his mind racing. That's more than I made in a year washing dishes. That's what your skill is worth. The question is, are you ready to operate at this level? Because this isn't playing around anymore. This is real business with real expectations and real consequences if you fail. Aiden thought about the hostel room with its water-stained ceiling, the dish pit where his hands had bled from industrial soap, the blisters that had taken weeks to heal. He thought about Maria selling tamales and Jasmine cooking in her apartment kitchen at 4 a.m. He thought about his father's face at that gala, certain that Aiden would fail, that he'd come crawling back within a week. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady, "but I have conditions." "I'm listening." "I only work with brands I actually believe in. If I think something is exploitative or dishonest, I walk, contract or no contract. I maintain final say on all content, and I want protection for the people I feature. No one gets exploited for a story. Everyone gets fairly compensated." Patricia's smile widened. "I was hoping you'd say something like that. We have a deal, Aiden. Welcome to Collective." The first 3 months of the partnership were exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. Aiden traveled constantly, first across Los Angeles, then California, then to other major cities. New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle. Each place had its own ecosystem of hustlers and dreamers, and Aiden found them everywhere. His team grew to 5 people. Dev became his full-time assistant and junior producer. He hired a camera operator, a professional editor, a social media manager, and a business coordinator. All of them were from the communities he featured. All of them understood the mission. StreetSpark's followers crossed 200,000, then 300,000. The content got sharper and more cinematic, but the heart remained the same. Real stories, real people, real struggle, and real triumph. The money was real too, more real than Aiden had ever imagined when he was counting pennies at the hostel. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Silver Lake, nothing fancy but entirely his own. A place where he could spread out, think, create. He bought a used car, a Toyota Camry that was 6 years old and had 100,000 miles, but ran perfectly and felt like a Rolls-Royce when he'd earned every payment himself. He even started a small emergency fund, something he'd never needed before, but now guarded carefully. 3 months of expenses, saved and untouched, because he'd learned what it felt like to have nothing and never wanted to be that vulnerable again. Every week he texted his mother like he'd promised, "I'm okay, still going, still building, love you." She always responded immediately, "We love you too, we are proud of you, we are here whenever you're ready, come home anytime." But he never did. Home was the Silver Lake apartment now. Home was the work. Home was proving to himself every single day that he could do this. Then came the video that almost destroyed everything. Aiden had featured a struggling gym owner in San Diego, a former military veteran named Marcus, who was trying to create a fitness community specifically for other veterans dealing with PTSD and physical injuries. The gym was barely staying open. Marcus was working 18-hour days, but the impact he was having on veterans' lives was profound and undeniable. The video was powerful and emotional. Aiden captured Marcus leading a workout session where grown men cried while doing push-ups, talking about trauma and healing and brotherhood. He filmed interviews with members who said the gym had literally saved their lives, given them purpose when they were contemplating suicide. The video was raw and real, and it exploded across social media. 3 million views in 2 days, 5 million by day 4. News outlets picked it up. Veterans organizations shared it. The gym's membership quadrupled overnight. But someone in the comments recognized Aiden in a reflection in one of the shots. It was barely a glimpse, maybe 2 seconds of his face reflected in a weight rack mirror, but it was enough. "Wait, is that Aiden Beaumont?" the comment read, posted by someone named at Beverly Hills Gossip. "As in the Beaumont family, the billionaire Beaumonts from Beverly Hills. Holy shit, is this rich kid playing poor for content?" Within 6 hours, the story spread across social media like wildfire. People dug up his old Instagram account, the one he'd abandoned months ago. Photos of him at galas and yacht parties, wearing designer clothes, standing next to his parents at charity events. Articles about his family's wealth popped up, Forbes lists and society pages. The narrative shifted instantly and brutally. The comments on Street Spark turned vicious. Rich kid playing poor for content. Privilege pretending to be relatable. He's been faking struggle for profit. This whole thing is a lie. He never had to work for anything. Exploitation at its finest, using real poor people's stories to build his brand. The backlash was instant and overwhelming. Street Spark lost 10,000 followers in a day, then 20,000. Some of the businesses he'd featured posted statements distancing themselves from him. Brands pulled out of deals. His assistant Dev fielded angry emails and calls from people who felt betrayed. Patricia Reeves called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Her office felt different now, less welcoming, more clinical. She didn't offer water or coffee this time, just gestured for him to sit and got straight to it. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice neutral but her eyes sharp as knives. "Are you from the Beaumont family?" "Yes," Aiden said, seeing no point in lying. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "My family is wealthy, very wealthy, but I haven't used their money since I left. Everything I've built with Street Spark, I built on my own." "Can you prove that?" "What do you mean?" "Can you prove you've been self-funded? Bank statements, pay stubs, receipts? Because right now, everyone thinks this whole thing is a rich kid's hobby, funded by daddy's credit card. They think you've been exploiting real struggle for content while living off a trust fund." Aiden felt his face flush with anger, not at Patricia, but at the accusation, the unfairness of it. "It's not a hobby. I've worked my ass off for this. I started with $200. I lived in an $18 night hostel where I could hear rats in the walls. I washed dishes for $8 an hour until my hands bled. I walked everywhere because I couldn't afford bus fare. None of that was fake. None of it was manufactured for content." "I believe you," Patricia said, and there was something genuine in her voice. "But the internet doesn't believe you, and perception is reality in this business. So we have two choices. We can cut ties, let this blow over, and you rebuild on your own. Or you can tell your story publicly. The real story, all of it. The whole truth, documented and proven. If I do that, everyone will know who my family is. Everyone will judge everything I do through that lens. Everyone already knows who your family is. That ship has sailed. The question is, do you control the narrative or do they?" Aiden spent that night in his Silver Lake apartment, staring at his laptop, drafting and deleting a dozen different statements. Each attempt felt too defensive or too angry or too apologetic. Nothing captured the complexity of what he'd been through, what he'd learned, what it all meant. At 3 in the morning, exhausted and emotionally drained, he gave up on writing and just started recording. He sat on his couch, no fancy lighting, no editing tricks, no script. Just him and his phone camera, telling the truth as clearly as he knew how. "My name is Aiden Beaumont," he began, his voice rough with exhaustion. "And yes, I'm from one of the wealthiest families in Beverly Hills. My parents are billionaires. I grew up in a mansion that has more bathrooms than most people have rooms. I went to private schools where tuition cost more than most people make in a year. I drove a Range Rover before I could legally drive. Everything you've read about my background is true. I'm not denying any of it." He paused, collecting his thoughts, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. "But here's what's also true. 6 months ago, I walked away from all of it. Not because I wanted to create content about being poor. Not because I thought poverty was some fun adventure I could try on like a costume. I walked away because I was suffocating under the weight of expectations I never asked for, living a life that felt completely meaningless, being defined by nothing except whose son I was. His voice cracked slightly, and he didn't try to hide it. At a charity gala, in front of 200 people, I told my parents I wanted to succeed on my own. They called my bluff. They cut me off completely, $200 and a duffel bag, that was it. No allowance, no credit cards, no trust fund, no family connections, nothing. He held up his phone, showing his banking app with his original transaction history, zooming in so the dates and amounts were clear. This is my account from day one, $200 on July 15th. Here's my first paycheck from Mike's Diner, $64 for 8 hours of washing dishes. Here's my hostel receipts, $18 a night for a room where the walls were so thin I couldn't sleep. Here's my grocery store purchases, buying the cheapest bread and peanut butter because that's all I could afford. Everything, every transaction. I didn't spend a cent of my family's money, not one. His hands were shaking now, and he let the camera see it. I started Street Spark because I met real people who were building real things with nothing but determination, and they inspired me more than anyone I'd ever met in Beverly Hills. Maria selling tamales on a corner for 7 years to support her daughter. Mike running his diner for 30 years, treating everyone like family. Jasmine cooking in her apartment at 4 a.m., building dreams while her daughter slept. They weren't born into success, they earned it. And I wanted to help tell their stories because they mattered more than any story I'd ever been told. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes red but his gaze steady. Was I privileged to even have the option to walk away? Absolutely. Do I recognize that most people don't get to choose poverty as a learning experience? Of course I do. I'm not claiming my struggle was the same as someone who never had a choice, but that doesn't make the work I've done any less real. It doesn't make the businesses I've helped any less legitimate, and it doesn't mean I didn't earn what I've built. He paused, taking a deep breath. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for the rich kid who chose to be poor. I'm asking for the same thing I've asked for since day one. Judge me by what I do, not where I come from. Judge me by the work, by the results, by whether I've helped real people or hurt them. That's all that should matter. His voice strengthened. Street Spark will continue to highlight real people building real things, whether you follow it or not. Because that mission matters more than my reputation, more than my feelings, more than anything else. These stories need to be told, and I'm going to keep telling them. He ended the recording and uploaded it without watching it back. If he watched it, he'd lose his nerve, start second-guessing every word, every expression, every moment of vulnerability. The response was immediate and divided. Half the internet doubled down, calling him a privileged brat playing at struggle, saying his apology wasn't enough, that he could never understand real hardship. The comments were vicious and personal, attacking not just his choices, but his character, his family, his very existence. But the other half responded differently, some with respect for his honesty, some with understanding that life was complicated, some with their own stories of trying to break free from expectations, from family pressure, from paths they didn't choose. Then something unexpected happened. The people he'd featured started speaking up. Maria posted a video in Spanish with English subtitles, standing at her tamale cart with tears streaming down her face. She talked about how Aiden had changed her life, how he'd never asked for anything in return, how he'd treated her with more respect than anyone from his world ever had. She showed the application to community college her daughter had completed, paid for by the money Maria had saved since her business grew. He's real, she said simply. His work is real. That's all that matters. Mike recorded a statement at his diner, standing in front of the dish pit where Aiden had worked for 3 months. This kid showed up knowing nothing, left everything behind, and worked harder than half the people I've hired in 30 years. He scrubbed pots until his hands bled. He never complained. He never quit. And when he started doing his videos, he still kept showing up for his dish shifts because he gave his word. You want to talk about character? That's character. Rosa, the waitress who'd been kind to him from day one, posted on her personal Facebook, I've worked in Beverly Hills. I've seen how rich people treat workers, like we're invisible, like we don't matter. Aiden never treated anyone that way. He learned everyone's name. He asked about our families. He saw us as people. If that's fake, he's the best actor I've ever met. Jasmine, whose viral video had started all of this, posted the longest defense. She talked about meeting Aiden before anyone knew who he was, about how he'd spent hours in her tiny apartment kitchen learning her story, about how he'd refused payment until she insisted because he said telling her story was payment enough. She shared text messages between them where he'd connected her with resources, given her advice, celebrated her victories like they were his own. She ended with a simple statement that cut through all the noise. He's real, his work is real, he changed my life, that's all the proof I need. The tide began to shift, slowly at first, then faster. Other business owners posted their experiences. Dev, his assistant, shared his own story of how Aiden had hired him, mentored him, paid him fairly when other companies would have exploited free intern labor. The camera operator posted about how Aiden had invested in training him, bought him equipment, treated him as a partner rather than an employee. Street Spark gained back its followers, then gained more. The comments turned from hateful to supportive, from accusations to apologies. Not everyone, of course. The internet never fully forgives or forgets, but enough. Patricia Reeves called again 3 days after Aiden's video went viral. The board met this morning, she said without preamble. They want to move forward. Actually, they want to move forward bigger than before. What do you mean? They want to expand Street Spark nationally, full funding, full support. You'd have creative control, a real budget to tell these stories at scale, resources you've never had before. This would be a legitimate media company, Aiden, your media company. How big are we talking? $2 million contract for the first year. Equity stake in any properties we develop together. Staff of 20+, offices in major cities. This would be a real operation, not just you and a camera anymore. $2 million, more money than he'd made in 6 months of backbreaking work combined. More than he'd ever imagined when he was washing dishes for $8 an hour. Money that was being offered because of his skill, his vision, his work, not because of his last name. I need conditions, Aiden said, his mind already working through what this would mean. I expected as much. Every story we tell, we hire from the community we are featuring. Local camera operators, editors, producers. We don't just extract content and leave. We invest in people, train them, pay them fairly. We build sustainable media careers in underserved communities. Agreed. I maintain final creative control. If I think something is exploitative or dishonest, I can kill it, contract or no contract. Agreed. And we set up a fund, separate from Street Spark, to directly support the businesses we feature. Not just exposure, actual resources, grants, microloans, mentorship, real material support. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's going to cost extra, separate from your contract. I know, but it's non-negotiable. Then we'll find the budget. I think the board will actually love that angle. It's good business and good ethics. She paused. You've learned a lot in 6 months, Aiden. I had good teachers. When can you come in to sign paperwork? Tomorrow morning. Aiden signed the contract in Patricia's office on a Thursday afternoon 2 weeks later, after lawyers had reviewed everything, after terms had been negotiated, after every detail had been finalized. His hands didn't shake this time. He knew exactly what he was doing and exactly what it was worth. That evening, he drove to Beverly Hills for the first time in 6 months. The neighborhood looked the same, but felt completely different, like a movie set instead of home. The mansions that had once seemed normal now looked absurd, excessive, monuments to wealth that served no real purpose. He pulled up to the gates of his parents' estate and texted his mother, I'm outside. Can we talk? The gates opened immediately, faster than the confirmation text arrived. His parents were waiting in the foyer, his mother's eyes already red from crying, his father standing stiff and uncertain in a way Aiden had never seen before. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The house smelled the same, looked the same, but everything felt different. I saw everything, his father said finally, his voice rough. The videos, the backlash, your statement, the response, all of it. And, Aiden asked, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't expected. And I was wrong, his father's voice cracked, something Aiden had never heard in 16 years. I thought you'd fail. I wanted you to fail, if I'm being honest. I wanted you to come crawling back in a week so I could say I told you so you'd fall in line and live the life we'd planned for you. Dad. Let me finish, please. His father stepped forward and Aiden saw tears in his eyes. You didn't fail. You succeeded in ways I never imagined, ways I never could have done myself. You built something real, something meaningful, something that actually helps people. You did it without our money, without our name, without our connections. You proved you didn't need any of it. You proved me wrong about everything. His mother couldn't hold back anymore. She rushed forward and wrapped Aiden in a hug so tight he couldn't breathe, her whole body shaking with sobs. "We are so proud of you," she whispered against his shoulder. So proud. And I'm sorry we doubted you. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to prove yourself. I'm sorry we didn't see what you needed, what you were trying to tell us. Aiden hugged her back, surprised by his own tears, by how much he'd missed his parents despite everything. I needed to prove it, he said quietly. Not just to you, to myself. I needed to know that I was more than just your son, more than just the Beaumont heir. I needed to know I could build something real. They moved to the living room, the same room where Aiden had announced his departure 6 months ago. But this time, they sat together as equals, not as parent and child, not as benefactor and dependent, not as authority and rebel. Just 3 people who loved each other and were finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. "So what happens now?" his father asked, his voice tentative in a way Aiden had never heard. "Now I keep building," Aiden said. "Street Spark is expanding nationally, 20 cities in the first year. I have a real team, real funding, real opportunities to tell stories that matter. This is just the beginning. Will you ever come back? Not to the business, I understand that's not what you want, but to the family." Aiden looked around the mansion, at the marble floors that cost more than most people's houses, the crystal chandeliers, the original artwork by masters whose names he'd memorized in school. It was beautiful, objectively stunning, but it wasn't home anymore. It probably never really had been. "I'll visit," he said carefully, "but I have my own place now, my own life. I earned it, built it from nothing, and I'm not giving it up, not for anything." His father nodded slowly, and Aiden saw something he'd never seen in those eyes before, genuine respect. Not the pride of a father looking at his son's achievements, the respect of one person recognizing another person's accomplishment. "That's all I ever really wanted for you," his father said quietly. "To be your own man, to stand on your own, to build something that mattered. I just didn't think you'd have to leave everything behind to find it. I didn't think you'd have to reject us to become yourself. Maybe that's exactly what I needed. Maybe we both needed it." They talked for hours, really talked, for the first time in years. Aiden told them about the hostel with its water-stained ceiling and thin walls, about Mike's diner and the dish pit where he'd learned what real work meant, about learning to budget, to struggle, to fail and get back up and try again, about Maria and her tamales, about Mike's gruff kindness, about Rosa's wisdom, about Jasmine's determination. His parents listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything, without offering money or connections or solutions. Just listening, understanding, seeing their son clearly for the first time. "I saw the video you made," his mother said eventually. "Your statement, the one where you showed all your receipts, all your bank statements. You looked so tired, so vulnerable. It broke my heart. I was exhausted, hadn't slept in 3 days, but it needed to be said. You were brave, braver than most people ever are. You told the truth even when it hurt, even when you knew people would judge you. That takes real courage." His father added, "The people who defended you, the businesses, the workers, they all said the same thing, that you were real, that you saw them, that you treated them with dignity. That's what I'm most proud of, son, not the success or the money or the followers, that you became the kind of person who treats everyone with respect, regardless of their station. That's what matters. When Aiden finally left, it was past midnight. The city lights of Los Angeles spread out below as he drove down from the hills. His mother had hugged him again at the door, holding on long enough that he'd felt her shoulders shake with quiet crying. "Text me more than once a week now," she'd asked. "I promise I'll even call sometimes. And bring someone to dinner sometime. A girlfriend, a friend, your team members, anyone. We want to know your new life, be part of it if you'll let us." "I will, maybe next month. I'll bring Dev and the whole team, show you what we're building." His father had shaken his hand, then pulled him into a brief, awkward hug that meant more than any words could have. "I love you, son. I'm proud of who you've become, prouder than I've ever been of anything." "I love you too, Dad." Aiden drove back to Silver Lake, his old neighborhood disappearing in the rearview mirror. He thought about where he'd started 6 months ago, angry and scared and desperate to prove himself. He thought about the kid who'd thrown that champagne glass, who'd walked away from everything, who'd had no idea what he was getting into. That kid was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew his own worth, someone who had earned his place in the world through effort and failure and persistence. The calluses on his hands had faded, but the lessons never would. 6 months later, Street Spark had expanded to 15 cities across America, with plans for 10 more by year's end. Aiden's team had grown to 37 people, all of them hired from the communities they served, all of them trained and paid fairly, all of them building careers in media that hadn't existed before. They'd helped launch 63 small businesses, raised over $1 million for local entrepreneurs through their grant program, and created a media library of real success stories that inspired millions every day. The numbers kept growing. Aiden still lived in Silver Lake, though he could easily afford Beverly Hills now, maybe even a mansion like his parents. He still drove his Toyota Camry, though he could buy any car he wanted. He still met with Maria at her corner every few weeks, though she now owned a small restaurant and employed 12 people, including her daughter who'd graduated from community college and was applying to nursing school. Money hadn't changed him because he'd learned what it couldn't buy: self-respect, purpose, the bone-deep satisfaction of building something from nothing. Those lessons were worth more than any trust fund, any inheritance, any amount of wealth he could have been given. On the 1-year anniversary of leaving his parents' house, Aiden posted a final reflective video on Street Spark. It was him, sitting on the same fire escape where he'd first filmed Maria a year ago, talking directly to the camera as the sun set over Los Angeles. "A year ago today, I had everything and felt like nothing," he said. $200 million in a trust fund with my name on it. A mansion, cars, private schools, every advantage. But I felt empty, purposeless, like my life was predetermined and nothing I did actually mattered." He paused, looking out over the city. "Today I have a fraction of what I started with in material terms, but I feel like everything because I built it. Every subscriber, every client, every story, every dollar. I earned it through work that mattered, through helping real people, through failure and growth and persistence." He looked back at the camera. Success isn't about where you start. It's about what you do with what you're given, even when what you're given is nothing. It's about showing up every day, doing the work that matters, helping others rise, staying true to your values even when it costs you everything. He smiled, genuine and earned. "Born rich, rebuilt from zero, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it, because losing everything was what finally made me real." The video ended, but the story didn't. It never really does for people who choose to build rather than inherit, to earn rather than accept, to become rather than simply be. If you've made it this far, thank you for being part of this journey. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment sharing your own story of building something from nothing, and smash that like button if this inspired you to chase your own version of success, whatever that means for you. Because real success, it's always earned, never given. Aiden Beaumont had learned that lesson the hard way, through blistered hands and sleepless nights, through failure and humiliation, through the lonely work of proving himself to a world that didn't care about his name. Some lessons cost everything to learn. But in the end, the price was worth it, because losing everything had taught him what truly mattered, what real success meant, what being unstoppable actually required. And armed with those lessons, there was nothing he couldn't build, nothing he couldn't achieve, nothing that could stop him from becoming exactly who he was meant to be. Not the Beaumont heir, not the rich kid, just Aiden, self-made, hard-won, real. And that was more valuable than any inheritance could ever be.